by reflection, which is noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest. These words were said by one of the most famous teachers of all times. They were said a very long time ago. I wonder if anyone here knows who said those words.
Confucius?
Exactly. Now, the title of my speech is Wisdom of the Early Ages, and you cannot possibly find something earlier and based on real facts than Confucius, as his name is transliterated in Chinese. So it's pronounced Confucius, Master Kong. He was one of the greatest teachers, philosophers, and politicians of all times, and in China, his teaching was one time a religion, and it still is. He has followers who treat him as the founder of a religious teaching. Confucius was born in the year 551 before Christ. So 2,500 years ago, this man was born. He was born in a middle-class family. But his father died when he was very young, his mother raised him alone. They lived in poverty. Nevertheless, he studied hard, and at that time in China, to finish school, you had to study 6 subjects. Calligraphy, archery, charioting. It's when you learn how to direct a chariot with horses, you know, the thing that you ride with horses, not riding the horse. Then you had to study mathematics, rituals, and music. Confucius adored music, and that's why we have this Chinese music playing here. I couldn't help myself to bond in some way with a person who's almost a god. He adored music, and he collected songs in different provinces. He was born in the city of Zhou, province, state Lu. But after some events in his life, he had to go into exile. He traveled across all China. He gathered songs, and he edited the famous Book of Songs of China, the ancient book that collected all kinds, all sorts, and all great songs that were created in this great country. Now, the method of teaching Confucius was at that time very unorthodox. It was not formal teachings. He was not giving homework. This was rather a conversation, a question posed to the student. So you can say that his teaching methodics were tailor-made for each student personally. He had many students, and these students wrote their diaries, and the students of students wrote their diaries, and that is how we learned about the life of Confucius, because there are no historical documents proving that he existed except for the work which is named Analects, the Analects, the work consisting of these diaries of his students and the students of his students. Confucius, after finishing school, he started to work for the government, so he became the government official. He raised the state of Lu to the prominent state. Unfortunately, not all people loved it. Not all neighboring provinces adored such raise. So there are many versions of what happened next. But Confucius was forced to go into exile. And during these travels, he came up with a teaching that led a person to being a superior man. Superior man is the golden words of his work. He wanted every man and woman to be superior. And for that, according to the task of my speech, I need to provide you 5 points of whatever, blah blah blah, I don't remember. I will give you 5 points, 5 most treasured Confucian virtues. The first one is zhen, which is humanness, compassion, benevolence. This was the first and the most important according to Confucius. Second one is yi, justice, righteousness. Third one is lu, which is proper rituals. Confucius believed that we as human beings in society need to interact according to certain rituals. And in my humble opinion, that is correct. Because each time we meet each other, we say hello. And if we know each other better, we hug each other. It is a ritual, and we do it, and we do hundreds of rituals each day without thinking about that these are rituals. We give somebody a hand to shake, we help a woman to carry the bags, we say hello, we say goodbye, we say good night, we say how are you doing. These are all rituals. Confucius thought about this 2,500 years ago. The fourth is ji, which is knowledge. Confucius believed that in order to be a superior person, you need to know things. You need to be aware of facts. You need to think. And the fifth is xin, which is integrity, high moral values. These 5 Confucian virtues are the key to becoming somebody superior. In the archery, Confucius said, we have a lot in common with the way of superior man. Because if an archer misses the center of a target, he turns back and he seeks the cause of his failure in himself, not the others. Confucius also said, if I will be traveling with 2 people, from at least one of them, I will be able to learn. And I'd like to mention the silver clause, I don't know, the silver rule as it is being referred to. What you do not wish for yourself, don't do to the others. Far before Kant or anybody else in China, Confucius came up with the silver rule. It is proven, it's written, proven that he did say something like that. Of course, Chinese language is a bit complicated, and since his words were distorted due to all the documents and that kind of stuff, we still know this for sure. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with Chinese music and Chinese wisdom, let us all become superior people in all possible ways. Thank you very much.
Speech run down to 15. I'm going to talk kind of like a jackrabbit so I can get it all done. But the evolution of in the age of agriculture up to the millennium, that's the beginning of Western civilization, one of the most exciting times for mankind. Keep in mind that it was 3/4 of the way through this evolution that Confucius, I can't say in Chinese, came up with his wisdom. But you cannot imagine that wisdom having been expressed at the beginning of this age. So I responded to the allure of an empty niche on the agenda, and here I am today. So let's get going. I have broken the story of evolution into 4 presentations. This is the 3rd of them. I've already covered these. My point is that the process of evolution, you can't really measure, but speeded up 1,000,000-fold or so since life began on Earth. It just keeps going faster and faster. Things that speeded up were sexual revolution, multicellular life, not sexual revolution, sexual reproduction, multicellular life, and mostly changes in our environment. And the unique thing about humans is the extent to which we change our own environment. And that's really the story here. So we're talking about the last time here from the beginning of agriculture 10,000 years ago up to the age of Western Europe. So, how did agriculture spread? You can barely see it. If you look right there, there's a little green dot. It started in the Nile Valley about 10,000 years ago, and it spread, you can start to see it now, it spread throughout the Mesopotamia and the Nile Valley. It was a good idea because it enabled people to have enough food that they could become numerous and they could beat the heck out of their neighbors and take more territory. It was a more efficient use of land. So they kept on expanding, and then the Chinese caught on a little bit later, but not too much. They're smart people. And they used different crops, and agriculture spread through Eurasia fairly quickly. This is long before Confucius now. And then it started in the Americas. But it started differently in the Americas. For one thing, Americas have this Isthmus of Panama in the middle. It started independently in Mexico and Peru, and it spread north-south, because that's the orientation of the Americas, and it continued to spread until by the year 1000, which is 1,000 years ago, it had spread all over Eurasia. Eurasians had it. What's more important is who didn't yet have it. It hadn't gotten to South America and North America yet because they just didn't need it. They were still nomadic. There weren't so many people that they couldn't support the nomadic lifestyle. There were probably 5 million humans about this time. Who knows, but that's the guess. So these people didn't have it. They planted Indian gardens. They knew if you dropped corn, it would grow into corn, but they didn't have settled agricultural civilizations. Also, they didn't have it in Australia. They didn't have it in Africa for reasons that it's very hard for ideas to get across the ocean and to get south of the Sahara. And besides that, it's warm there. They didn't need it. Where were we? In agriculture, they knew that scattering seeds was a handy thing to do if you wanted to find food there later. So they knew how plants reproduced. They had, in the Paleolithic revolution, in the preceding 40 or 50,000 years, they had invented all sorts of stuff, including stuff like this fish hook, tomahawks, and harpoons, great deal of stuff. They had developed navigation with skin and frame boats. The Eskimos were presumably paddling around on kayaks, and they had gotten to Australia with something like this, we imagine, many years before. In warfare, they had the bow and arrow and several other more effective things, and really it has long come to pass that human beings' biggest enemy was nothing in the wild, it was human beings. We were competing with ourselves. We were trading stuff, speaking of killing people. The best thing for making an arrow to kill people is obsidian. Obsidian is native glass, which comes from where they have volcanoes. And volcanoes don't exist every place, but obsidian arrowheads are very widespread. How did they get there? It had to have been by trade. There was a lot of trade before the age of agriculture. Then, in terms of polity, most of the tribes, hunter-gatherer tribes today, are bounded by the number of about 150. But they had tribes and extended clans. As I say, there were 5 million or so of them. They had expanded a bit. And they started to keep records, scratch notches on things, and they started to believe in things beyond what they knew. They were superstitious. They were or religious, similar concepts. They knew that they were mortal, but they believed that their tribes were immortal for the most part, so they believed in fertility. This is the Venus of Willendorf. Isn't she beautiful? From 25,000 years ago, they believed in fertility. So that's where we were at the start of the age of agriculture. Now, I'm going to click ahead. And say I'm going to begin agriculture very arbitrarily with pigs. But other stuff was also edible. They also learned how to dry food, very important, because the people had migrated out of Africa. They needed to store food for the winter. Here in Ukraine, you can't grow crops in February terribly well. They planted the 8 founder crops, and which one was first, who knows, but there were 2 types of wheat, barley, lentils, peas, vetch, and flax. Flax for fabric, that's linen, and also for oil. They started to store stuff, and they made friends with pussycats. Pussycats are very nice for keeping the mice down when you are storing food. They invented a fishnet, which is more efficient than a hook in most cases, but what it indicates is that they knew how to make string, twine, rope, and those are very important because you could also use that to make traps, to catch animals, and to make sails, and to manage boats, which they were doing. And this is, I'm going forward in history, but this is in Mesopotamia now, as they developed their agriculture. They developed cities. This is a city of 5,000 or so. The city is a major civilizational development because in a city of 5,000 you can't know everybody. For all of our history up to this point, we had stayed in tribes of 150 or so, max. That's called the Dunbar number, after the guy who discovered it. That's the number of people you can know personally. In a city, you have to deal with strangers. That took a lot of evolution among people to deal with strangers, to take advantage of what they could do, what they knew, and not to have them take advantage of you, the dumb boy from the farm. So, learning how to live in cities was a major advance, and Confucius gave us rules for that. This is trade again. These adze blades came down the Danube to Ukraine. This is bricks. They didn't have much in the way of rocks and lumber in Mesopotamia. They used bricks. World's first city for building bricks. Okay, now let's switch to the Americas. The Indians, or the precursors of the Indians in America, had been eating wild tubers and potatoes and corn for a long time, and they finally developed agricultural civilizations, as I showed you, about 4,000 years ago, with corn, and they had their domestic meat source, the guinea pig. Not quite as good as a pig, a cow, or a goat, but that's what they had, that's what they did. Another thing, and this still echoes today, the Indians didn't have individual traders. They traded among villages. They're very communal. They should have been born here. They'd been the best communists ever. Because everything was communal. And what that did, the implications for the civilization are still felt today. Because the Indians are very communal. They have not adapted to the individualistic European way of life. And the reservation Indians from Hudson's Bay in Canada down to Chile just don't deal well with modernity because they're not very individualistic and they're sad people. Just a twist of evolution. That's the way they live. Now here in Eurasia, somebody discovered that the donkey was good for carrying things, so for overland trade they used donkeys, and donkeys spread widely. In the Americas, they had llamas, which live only in the mountains, the Andes Mountains, and the Incas controlled their trade, so these guys didn't go, and there were no great beasts of burden until the Spanish brought horses. So the Americas were handicapped by not having beasts of burden. They didn't have north-south rivers, and the ideas just didn't spread very well in the Americas. Meanwhile, going back to Europe, Europeans had been baking these bricks and making these cities, and one of these times they'd baked the bricks a little bit hot, and they discovered something kind of shiny coming out of what they made. And said, this shiny stuff, what is it? It was copper. And it turned out to be a good thing. And then they did it a little bit more, and they discovered something else called tin. And then they tinkered around a little bit, and they discovered that a 10-to-1 mixture, copper to tin, made a nice hard metal called bronze, which was pretty good for making things. That they had been using wheels, potter's wheels, for a millennium or so, but without metal they weren't terribly useful, but then they said, let's turn that thing on its side, put some metal on it, and they made a wheel, which turned out to be extremely useful, albeit a while. They invented money and accounting to keep track of that money. They developed bronze swords and shields, and the world's first big city, maybe 1,000 years ago, this is where the father of the Jews, Abraham, came from. 70,000 people, kind of hard to imagine. The Phoenicians were hugely successful sailors on the 3 protected seas, Mediterranean, Black Sea, and Red Sea, and they traded goods and ideas traveled quite freely. Then somebody heated those kilns up a little bit more, and something else shiny came out. It was iron, which was even more useful and more abundant than copper. And they discovered after a while that by mixing it with carbon they could make steel, and oh, that was deadly. So they loved it. It changed civilization quite a bit. They were able to use it to keep people in subjugation. Slavery became widespread. They could use them. They invented plows, first made out of wood and then later metal. The Chinese invented the abacus. Now this was a big invention because you can't do arithmetic using Roman numerals or cuneiform or any of the other stuff, but what they could do is figure out the numbers they wanted to manipulate, put it on the abacus, and then figure the answer and put it back into writing, which is what they did. About this time they started to believe in one God, the Zoroastrians and the Jews, and they got everybody on the same sheet of music, and among other things they said, be fertile and multiply, and they indeed did that. The people of the book were fertile. Then we have the big empires, Sargon, Akkad. They started to take their reading and writing to parchment and papyrus so they could take the records around. And then came the Romans and Pax Romana, and it was a peaceful time, more or less, as long as you were under the protection of the Romans. And it was a good time for Christ to preach about a benevolent God. A benevolent God wouldn't have worked in the earlier ages because people were not that benevolent. The Roman Empire fell apart. The Vikings had their own altruism. The Vikings stood shoulder to shoulder, side by side, and they were very altruistic with other Vikings. And they were fearsome in war because no Viking would allow himself to give way at any moment. And they conquered as far away as, say, Ukraine. They became the founders here. Europe fell into warring states. They invented stirrups, they invented longbows, and a lot of things. They got better and better at killing each other, which is in my next story. So let's look. What happened over this time? There were physical changes. We developed alluring blue eyes, right? They evolved out of Estonia, what they figured. We developed lactose tolerance, and we also developed weaker eyes and teeth as we didn't need them so much for hunting. There were invisible changes in the human genome, as evidenced by Confucius. We got used to steady, hard work, which is farming, instead of episodic endeavors, which is killing animals. We became less impulsive, less violent, because we had to live together in communities, and we got more intelligent. Everybody was giving IQ tests, but all of the indirect evidence is that we were getting smarter as we went. And they do track that in the next millennium. There are indirect ways of measuring. So this was an era, an epoch of amazingly significant changes to the human family. We became more numerous. We're going from 5 million up to hundreds of millions by the end of the epoch, and agriculture absolutely dominated. The agriculture was where it was. So that's where we are at the millennium. And then in the next millennium, in my next talk, last one too, we talk about what happened in this last millennium. Things went forward for about 8 centuries up until the Industrial Revolution. And then they started spinning backwards, which brings us to the problems we see today.
volunteers for this strange question? Oh. The world without money would be the way it was before money, the world of so-called barter, like trading things for other things. And people who are now leeching of the system of money, like people who don't work but only have bank accounts and live on a percent of these bank accounts, they wouldn't exist. Therefore, everybody would learn something, something valuable, some skill that they can exchange with another thing. And some people are living like this today. One woman in Germany, she uses this system where she, for example, like cleans someone's house and they give her food and or make some kind of clothes and they give her another kind of service. And she decided as a way of philosophy to get this way of life because maybe she wants her life to be more easy for her in a way and less senseless with this paper or electronic money. And I think that with the world without money will survive because people still will do things and receive things. But money, they allow us to not have barter, they allow us easier exchange in a way. So even though they allow us to have bank accounts and live off the percents from bank accounts and have credits and lose money on credit, but it makes our life easier in the way that we don't have to exchange things and services directly, etc. Thank you.
You have a possibility to make a wish, some special sum of money. What would be sum of money that will allow you not working, not for earning money? It will guarantee all your life just to spend money. What would be this sum of money? Like $1 million for me, it is $8 million. Don't ask why. Vasily, please.
A month ago, I had a very specific money goal that I had in mind. It was to have enough money in my hands so that I can move out of my parents' apartment into a new one. Now, with this goal in mind, I started saving money and actually I found a great apartment. A friend of mine posted on Facebook about a room in an apartment where he lives, and it was just a great place of my dream. It was near Metro Glovskaya, and my office is on Basseina Street, so it's like 10 minutes walk, which is a dream. You don't have to commute and you save 2 hours every day. The roommates were great people, one of them was my friend, and the price was not that high. So I was, wow! I jumped at the opportunity, called the landlord, and I'm discussing everything with him, and I'm ready to go and see the apartment. Now 2 days ago, I called him before going to the apartment, and he says that the room is already rented because there was miscommunication. He said that the girl would, I heard that the girl would z'їжджати from the room, but he said заїжджати. So what I needed to do is go exactly right at that moment. But then I got so upset because the place of my dream is now occupied. I can never find a good room like that. So what I did, I stopped looking for apartments because I was really upset. And then, all of a sudden, I see this strange ad, and it doesn't look very good, but I thought it's worth trying because I have only 2 weeks to move out. And then I come there, and lo and behold, the place is huge with high ceiling. It's very close to my work, even better than I thought about the previous apartment. Everything is nearby, parks, supermarkets, all kinds of cool places, like opera house. And I was like, whoa! No matter what happens to you, if you think you lost opportunity, it doesn't mean that it's final loss. Because when you look back, you see the dots connecting. And that's what I want to leave you with. No matter what is happening that you think is not good for you, you never know what will happen tomorrow. Because the dots connect only in retrospective.
Your unlimited life. Volunteers? Lisa?
Actually, I think that if I were a link on MacLeod, it will be very great because I will see all historical events in real time, so I can analyze them and I can predict something. And if I were a teacher of history, I can explain all for my children. So it was a very easy question for me. I mean, because actually my profession, it's the main love, the main hobby, the main, I don't know how to say it. So for me, I always dreamed also if I have some machine of time, I have some possibility to go in some century to see something and to understand more how it really looks like. Because as always, all our historical books, all our films, all another stuff, actually they say us something. But we never know if it's a real event. We never know if it's a real person, or maybe it just one writer just wrote some story and now we teach this like a history. So I think if I were a Duncan MacLeod and if I have a machine of time, I will be discovering all these things and I will be create the full, very correct history, which can show us the real story and the real events. Thank you for the question.
Good opportunity to make a wish to change something in life, in our life, some fact. Like it can be anything. As for me, I don't like when weather is too hot, and I would make a wish. The temperature never will upper than 32, 33 degrees. Please, welcome.
Hi, all. One question. Do you believe in destiny? Yes. So, okay. I'm from those people who do believe in destiny. So, if I had a chance to change something radically with one click of my fingers, it would be very easy. It would be very easy, and a temptation don't develop myself, don't develop our community, would be very big. When I was child, one of my dream was about to be an invisible man. Why did I dream about this? I wanted just to become a shop, a toy shop, and yet all needed toys. But when I got a little bit older, I had knowledge that I need to develop myself, and everyone needs to make something, to have some direction in his life, and to adopt destiny. Thank you.
Opportunity to advise something to you, to yourself, when you were 15 years old. What would be this advice? Just one advice. Please welcome.
If I had such a possibility to invite myself, but 10 years younger, I would tell, relax, Masha, just wait next 10 years. That's all that I would advise to myself. Why? Because I really like talking about how old I am. I'm not just, how old are you? And you are not, oh no, I'm a girl, I don't answer that question, you know. I'm 34 and I'm proud of it. Because with each year, when we meet next time and when I say, I am 84 and I like it, you will upload. You know, right now that's just nothing. And with each year, I see myself growing. Not only in getting, I actually get less education than I used to have. But I get more experience, more things that really I could look at myself 10 years younger, I'm like, oh Masha, what are you wearing? You know, what are you doing? Why do this? Why do that? And with each year, I look at myself 5 years younger and I say, Masha, what you did? That was better, of course, than 10 years, but still there are lots of things to improve. And next year I look at myself 2 years younger and said, well, you know, you've learned some lessons already, so you're good. Keep on going, girl, keep on going. Next 10 years and you would be just amazing. So I wouldn't give any pieces of advice. I will live just like we live. I would not change anything, because if I want to people eat only chocolate, someone definitely would not like that, right? So the temperature is hot, I like the colder temperature. So there would be so much disturbance in the air, and with invention of guns and other things that we've learned, we won't survive. So let's keep it as we have right now, with ourselves included.
In particular, describing the pluses and minuses of how to make an evaluation. Getting back to today, my one comment, I know I'm going to hit the odd counter a lot here. I liked your speech in general. My one comment is that, I mean, it's the best speech I saw without an alcohol bottle in your hand, I guess. That's my first comment. So I can remember that at the Russian-speaking club a lot. So. But anyway, the pluses and minuses in general, that's how I'm going to go through this. Overall, it was very nice music, good tone, very good pause and remarks. I mean, excellent, even for native speakers don't even pause that well normally. They usually get frustrated, get nervous, so it was very good. Very good eye contact, as you're even doing right now. Excellent eye contact. It's not a romantic dinner, so don't worry about it. I don't know. Just some of the negative points a little bit. There are a couple of things that got me. It's the Chinese pronunciation, it's tough. I don't know myself. I think there's a little bit of a struggle there, but it's understood. It's not your language. Happy to bring my Chinese friend along one time if you're interested. He can correct any of the Chinese pronunciations as needed. One point that caught me a lot, and I mentioned the gram at the time of the remarks, was I think he said something about the silver rule. And I think I'm not sure if you really meant the golden rule.
No, of course not.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I was trying to think.
Different things. Golden rule is about positive. Do something that you would like to be done to yourself. Silver rule is negative. Don't do something that you wouldn't like to be done to yourself.
Silver rule is maybe, I wasn't sure if there was some.
They refer to it.
Okay. And the idea of reminding people of certain points I thought was pretty good overall. I took the speech points here. Generally, I mean, you were 5s in almost all categories, except maybe 1 was a 4. I mean, for the most part, it was very clear. Again, the engaging point with the audience, I think, was the strongest point. And I hope that overall, I think you captivated me in a set of remarks which maybe if were given by somebody else, I might not be as interested in these particular remarks. I think you did a good job, not only in the speech, but in the presentation. That's the way I felt. So very positive overall, and happy to give you my notes if that's what you'd like. And
yes,
that's it for now. I'll keep it short. Thank you.
Knowledge will be evaluated by Victor Fursov. Please welcome.
Let I'm very pleased to evaluate here the speech of our honorable Graham Cyber. And of course, we have a little opportunity to go back to our school time. Because actually not all of us historians like some of our Toastmasters. And people like Graham who knows history, computers, life and traveling and many things as well. But nevertheless, from my point of view, first of all, you need to remember that in Toastmasters there is a rule. When you want to evaluate, you must motivate. You don't need to evaluate and to be strong critics to demotivate. Otherwise, another people will not come here because all will feel that all critics are here just looking for you and just trying to erase all your thoughts and all your ideas, and it's really demotivating. Even if your relatives will tell you some bad words, it's hardly terrible, not alluring at all. That's why, first of all, I will be a little bit critic, because first of all, we didn't get a title in a paper, so we don't know what was going on. But then, I don't have just actually the book for evaluation, because actually we have a Toastmasters book for evaluation. It's also quite good, because this is kind of a special manual. But that's not about speech in general. In general, I like speech very much, because it gives us a lot of ideas and motivation, maybe to go to internet to look for some interesting historical movies, maybe to look for some books, who likes books, and to develop our integrity and our knowledge. But from another side, I recognized very much that Graham also wanted to improve his speech, including here different computers skills. Definitely. First of all, of course, he made this two parts of a screen, but it was still very useful for screen for computer, not for presentation here in a large scale. Because when you're making animation might be jumping from the screen and making it big picture, very big picture, so it's more colorful, visible. Because always I try to stress, if you are writing something on your presentation, letters must be very big as possible, not very small, so you can read it, you can see it, but others cannot see it at all. So this is a small disadvantage, making pictures as big as possible. And the second was quite interesting because you was like a lecturing in television, so television is going, you're speaking, and also this very difficult to speak about history of several centuries, not centuries, thousands of years during 7 minutes, actually. But the great advantage that after your speech, you still stop very abruptly about the most alluring idea, but the most interesting stuff will be going in my next speech. So please welcome. So you will get the answer of all these questions. But also I have some special proposals, because when we discussed about all this history, by the way, this was probably, as I understood, maybe this was a Darwinism ideas in the development of human being already after ape became human, Homo sapiens, and then Homo sapiens developed industry and agriculture. But some, even doctors of sciences, they do not believe in Darwinism and they do not believe in history, because history is written not only by the space, air, but some historians, people. And it can be easily rewritten, because some discoveries very controversial in archaeology, very controversial, like a hammer with several thousand, 700,000 years old somewhere in the soil, and we cannot understand what is a hammer or not hammer, or this is just a ring or not a ring, or this is obsidian ball somewhere underground, somewhere with the millions of years or not. This is historic artifact or not. So try to combine a real Darwinistic theory with some controversial, unusual stuff, because internet full of controversial questions. And some people say, Earth is flattened. Yes, Earth is flattened, and Moon doesn't exist. This is just reflection. So I heard about it in the internet and YouTube. Yes, it is true. And some scientists prove it. Some scientists prove it. So that's why we need to prove it every time with some real historian evidences. So thank you.
First, I will ask you the same question. What was your childhood dream?
Childish dream. I do remember my one-room apartment in my childhood time when I was sitting and reading and writing some letters, because I liked very much to write letters abroad. So it was price only 17 kopecks. So the kopecks for letter abroad. I sent letters to Cuba, to India, to Germany, and of course I was dreaming about traveling. So later when I became a scientist, actually I sent 100 letters every year. Yes, for my scientist friends, colleagues and so on. Now I send over 1,000 maybe emails every year, because now it became so easy. But childhood dream was probably traveling. That's why I had opportunity for traveling after that. I visited 15 countries, much less than Iran did. So a lot of in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.